Can you hear me well? Right. It's good. Okay. And in case you find me speaking a little fast, you can always raise your hand and ask me to slow down. I'll be very conscious of speaking slow. So, welcome to the second segment of our masterclass, which is response planning and strategic readiness with artificial intelligence. So, in this part of the program, we look at readiness not as a checklist or a compliance requirement, but as a system of coordination that links national structures, sector operations, and individual institutions. Across this room, we have participants from very different operational environments. That includes national emergency coordination, industrial, port operations, institutional safety management. So we have a very highly experienced participants here. So the principle, however, is the same irrespective of which discipline we come from. Readiness only works when it connects across these boundaries. So when we use the term strategic readiness, we are describing the capability to move from awareness to coordinated action, to ensure that every partner, every agency, and every level of command can act in sync using the same picture of the situation. And that is where technology, particularly platforms like AlertSim, play a defining role. AI helps maintain that shared data driven picture so that decision makers at every level can align in real time. So over the next few minutes we'll unpack how that concept works in practice, how strategy translates into coordinated readiness. Am I legible? You able to understand me? Yeah. So let us start by defining what strategic readiness is. So in this, everyone in this room already understands preparedness. It's something that you all do on a daily basis. So what we are discussing here isn't new in concept, but rather we'll take a deeper look at how these existing preparedness systems align and function together. So strategic readiness goes beyond individual plans or departmental procedures. It's about how an entire system moves as one when a situation unfolds. It's not just about individual preparedness or how one team responds. It's about how an entire system moves together. So whether we are talking about a national coordination center, an industrial emergency unit, or a school safety team, readiness only becomes strategic when everyone shares the same awareness, understands their role, and acts in coordination and sync with each other. So if you look at this pyramid, it represents that structure of readiness. At the top, we have the multinational, we have the national level or multi-sectoral agencies where policy, command, and coordination takes place. At the middle, we have organizational level, we have organizational level agencies or facility level where frontline teams execute the plans and policies created by the national level agency and provide real time feedback upward. And at the base, we have the institutional or organized facility level people who actually implement those plans. Now, the flow goes both ways. Decisions move down and information moves up, keeping the system responsive and learning. Now, this is where AI becomes relevant. Artificial intelligence supports that two-way connection by allowing each layer to see the same picture. So if we talk in terms of the incident command system, they have this terminology called a common operating picture, and that becomes a very important factor when we are managing incidents, because decisions are happening at various levels. But if we see a different picture, each level, if they are seeing a different picture, the decisions that are going to be made, they are not going to be aligned to each other. So That's where AI becomes relevant in providing you a common operating picture or a shared operating picture of the situation as it unfolds. So, as we move forward, we'll visualize how these layers connect, how data, decisions, and actions circulate in one ecosystem. With now that we have defined readiness at different levels, national, sectoral, and institutional, let us look at how these levels actually connect. Readiness, as we know, isn't confined to one department or one plan. It's a network of organizations, people, and information systems, all depending on one another. Each part of this ecosystem brings something essential. Government provides authority and resources, industry provides infrastructure and operational control, communities and NGOs provide reach, trust, and ground level awareness. But this system only performs well when these parts are linked. When information flows clearly, everyone shares the same understanding of what's happening. Let's think of this process as a loop, starting with information, decision, action, and feedback. Information flows outward from early detection or monitoring systems. Decisions are made at the right level and communicated across partners. Action follows, and feedback from the field refines those decisions for the next cycle. That loop of information, decision, action, and feedback is the heartbeat of readiness. We saw this vividly during the 2011 Japan earthquake and tsunami. Within hours, national agencies, local governments, and private operators were all working simultaneously. Power companies, the self defense forces, local municipalities, everyone was involved in this um, uh, crisis management. Where those data connections were strong, coordination happened almost instantly. Where they weren't, delays happened. It showed that readiness wasn't about the strength of a plan, but it was about the strength of the connection between these plans. Now, this is where AI can add real value. AI won't change the structure, it would only strengthen the loop so that coordination and communication is much more accurate and insightful. It will help ensure that data doesn't get lost in translation, giving every level of the system the same real time picture. It can help you build situational unity without forcing everyone into the same operational mold. Think for a moment about your own organization. Which part of this loop do you influence the most? Information, decision, action, or feedback? And where could stronger data or coordination make your response faster or precise or more precise? If you would like to share anything from your own um, experience, that would be fantastic. Thank you. So next, let us look at a real life scenario, one where a single event can trigger into cascading consequences across the entire ecosystem. So we have a
The only thing I see on the other, on the past graphic you had, is that everything seems to be like equal, but to me, there are some aspects
hierarchies.
that are more important. For example, telecommunication,
Absolutely.
energy, with health. I wouldn't get all of them together in the same category.
Right.
Am I right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. What we are trying to show here in the graphic is that uh, the importance of one department would be bigger, higher than others, but the fact that all of them have to share a common operating picture makes it important. So we are trying to show how common operating picture across all agencies would be important, irrespective of their relative importance. But yes, so certainly your energy, telecommunications, they are going to play a much more important role when it comes to an incident. And maybe at some point in time, public safety might be a more important one than your port and marine maritime sector, considering what the crisis is. So for sure. So let us take a simple example of a flood. So we have a nice graphic here which shows heavy rainfall. It always starts with heavy rainfall, and today we don't have that heavy, hopefully. So it starts with a heavy rainfall, and what happens next is what really defines our readiness. So as the rainfall intensifies, sensors begin detecting rising water levels. Soon the overflow reaches infrastructure, roads, power substations, industrial zones. And within hours, institutions like schools, hospitals, and local offices have to start making decisions, and often before official communication has flowed to them. So every layer will react to the ongoing situation. Now, readiness isn't about the reaction, it's more about the coordination. So when those layers communicate and synchronize, disruption is reduced significantly. When they don't, the effects cascade. So imagine every, what happened during COVID or other scenarios. Once we start panicking, it's very quick. What you see on the road is a lot of traffic. People start evacuating on their own. You have traffic jams that happen, and then things start moving into chaos. So a powerful real world example was the 2011 Thailand floods. Many factories were never underwater, yet they shut down because supply chains, access roads, and distribution centers were disrupted. This event taught a crucial lesson that readiness wasn't only about protecting our own site, it was also about understanding how we depend upon others in the ecosystem. So the organizations that had mapped those interdependencies recovered within weeks. Those that hadn't, it took several months for them to, recover from the situation. This reminds me of my personal experience working with Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, ADNOC. So I come from an oil and gas background, and in 2013 we had just commissioned a new polymer plant in ADNOC refining, and we started it like our normal how we start a plant, and this was freshly commissioned, and a lot of money was spent in building that. It was a naphtha cracker, and during the risk assessment process probably something got missed, and we had hydrogen leaking, and there was an explosion, and the newly commissioned plant along with a few other plants blew up. Now, of course, we had the initial emergency situation of saving lives, protecting the assets, environment. Fortunately, no one died. And but the problem was that this plant was the feedstock to a polymer plant called a company called Buruj. And so they used to wait. Their feedstock, their input was coming from us, and this plant was in operation for like 6 months, and this happened. So fortunately we had our business continuity plans ready, and Ricardo mentioned in his talk about how important BCM plays a role. Fortunately we had our business continuity plans ready, and we were able to buy feedstock from some Japanese vendors and provide it to Buruj so that they could then meet their commitments to. Exactly. So business continuity plans, disaster management plans, they play a very important role. Now, both these events are an example of a cascading risk. It was not only about the people and the asset and the financial losses, but the cascading effect to our partners who was a polymer industry. Now, one event can trigger multiple consequences across various sectors. Now, this is where AI changes the game. So, in what sense? That typically, when we do a business continuity management, we would do a workshop like this. We would have people from operations, we'll have people from strategy, we'll have people from health safety, and everyone will identify, if this happens, what if this happens, to each one of us, how it is going to affect. So the safety person would say that, okay, lives will be lost, the assets will be lost, environmental damage. The operations people will, the business people will say it will affect our business in this way, etc. Now, I have personally chaired these sessions, and it is very exhaustive. You spend days on end trying to find out what can go wrong, what are the consequences, you map them on a risk matrix, you come up with recommendations, etc. Now, the way AI or AlertSim can help is it can run these what if scenarios for you. So now you wouldn't have to brainstorm each time. It understands what the risk is, and it will give you what your specific uh, cause and effect, if I may use that term. Now, uh, did we not have computer based systems in the past who could do that? Yes, you could have a checklist, but a checklist is not customized to your organization. But an AI like AlertSim has already read through your operations, has read through your organizational structure, it has read through your procedures, it has understood what your numbers are in terms of business. And now, when it gives,
There's one thing where I really don't understand about the IA is that do you have to feed the system with all this information in cascade? For example, if you got a flood, then affects the power source or the, do you have to feed the system or it will learn by itself?
right, that's a very good point. So the answer is partly yes and partly no. So for example, in AlertSim, what happens is that when you tell where your facility is located, so it will ask you when you're creating an asset in AlertSim, it tells you, okay, give me the geographic locations of where your asset is. So when you say that it's Panama, it already knows that Panama has these risks. So there is some information that it already knows from Google, from various other sources, from the data that it has already been fed generically. So when you say Panama, it knows floods is an issue. It already knows about Panama Canal Authority. It generally knows about the economics of Panama. So that information it already has. What it does not have is very specific organization level information, which you would feed only once at the very beginning of configuring AlertSim. So once it has that base information, and whenever you might have a change, you might want to update that information, but it's only at the beginning that you have to provide it information. And every time it will keep using the same information in different ways and tell you what the risks are. Exactly the way how we would do it. So if I were to join a new company, I would go through the documents once and I would know what my facility is, what my operating parameters are. And then each time in a risk assessment, I will use the same information that I have. That answer you. I hope it answers your question. Yeah. So what AlertSim would do in such a situation is that it will provide you with very specific organization level risk assessments or what if scenarios for various scenarios that you would have. So that could include a business continuity scenario, it could include an emergency response scenario, it could include a crisis management scenario. And I'm soon going to share a case study with you, which will give you a better understanding of this. Before we get into the case study, let me take you quickly through some points here. So across every level of the ecosystem, from command centers to field operations, 5 elements consistently determine readiness. So you have governance and leadership. So readiness begins with clarity of authority: who decides, who acts, who supports. In any crisis, confusion at the top multiplies complexity on the ground. And again, I'm going to give an example from the oil and gas sector. You might remember the Piper Alpha incident that happened in 1988 in United Kingdom, UK. Uh, that was one incident that changed all the regulations for the oil and gas industry. Ricardo mentioned about having prescriptive standard risk assessments. That one incident shifted the whole industry from being prescriptive to being probabilistic. And they came up with this term called as low as reasonably practicable. Operators had to demonstrate that our risks are as low as possible. Only meeting standard requirements was no longer acceptable. And one of the main reasons for this incident, that Piper Alpha incident, was that when the incident happened, so what was the incident? There's a offshore oil platform which started pumping oil not into the pipe but into the atmosphere, oil and gas, and it caught fire. Now, this platform was being fed oil from four different platforms. So, the simplest thing to do was shut down the four different platforms, and the explosion, the fire stops. There was no clear delegation of authority to the operator that he can shut down the plant, and it went on for days. So you can imagine, how governance and leadership plays a very crucial role when it comes to an emergency situation. So that's the first element. The second element is information and intelligence. So time is the most critical variable. It isn't only about having data, but about how fast that information reaches those who must decide. So shared situational awareness, whether through dashboards, maps, or even WhatsApp groups, forms the basis for the layers of coordination. The third one is resources and capabilities. Plans are only as strong as the people, logistics, and tools that bring them to life. Training, technology, and readiness of assets all fall under this layer of resources and capability. Finally, we have the most important one, which is second most important one is the communication and coordination. So crisis expose weak links. A strong network depends on trust and constant information exchange between agencies, sectors, and community responders alike. And finally, we have learning and adaptation. Every exercise, every incident, every after action review must feed back into planning. That's what turns lessons into institutional memory. Now, AI strengthens each of these elements. So, what AlertSim can do is it can process vast information faster than a single person or a team coming together, giving leaders time to think instead of time spent gathering data. Now, we all know that we the most fun part of a risk assessment is to look at the risks and come up with solutions which will reduce the risk. But think of it, what actually happens. We spend more time filling tables than time that is spent on actually being creative. So what something like AlertSim does is it reduces the efforts in filling risk assessments. It gives you insights into what could be recommendations, so we are free to think creatively as to what can we do to reduce risk, free our time from laborious work, and free it up for being more creative and finding solutions. So that's, I love saying this because I whenever it comes to AI, the first thing is, we always thought that AI will do the laundry and we will be doing the poems and the creative painting. Whereas what we see sometimes today is AI is doing the fun part and we are left to do the laborious work, but not with AlertSim. AlertSim frees us to do the creative part, whereas AI takes the burden of the processes. So, right. So this is, so next we'll look at where AI can help us, or AlertSim can help us before, during, or after an incident. So we want to cover the whole life cycle of an incident. So the planning phase is where AI shows its first major advantage. It helps us see what might happen before it does. Traditionally, planning relies on past experience and periodic reviews. AI changes that. It brings real time intelligence into that process. By integrating multiple data sources, weather forecasts, infrastructure monitoring, social and operational inputs, AI begins to spot trends and relationships that humans might notice. And this is something that Ricardo discussed at length. From there, it can generate predictive insights, risk models, possible event scenarios, and even early triggers for escalation. This means we can test our plans against multiple what if situations long before an incident ever occurs. One of the biggest values is how it identifies planning gaps, missing steps, outdated data, or unclear escalation paths, and recommends adjustments automatically. The result is a living emergency response plan, one that evolves with changing risk data. Instead of being static on paper, it becomes a dynamic system that updates itself as the world around it changes. Now, this might give a wrong impression that it does all of this automatically. That is not true. It does all the processing automatically, but the decision is still ours. And that is very crucial. In fact, yesterday, three of us, Ricardo, me, and Ashwina, we were working together, and I was asking ChatGPT to do something for me. So I uploaded a document and I told him translate it for me in Spanish. So it said, I have read the document. Would you like me to start translating it? I said yes. So then it thought for 5 minutes and then said, would you like me to look? I will translate it in this way. I said okay, translate it in this way. Then it again thought for like 3.5 minutes, and then it said, but I will only be doing so much. Is that okay? I said that's fine. Do it. It kept repeating this question. I'm not joking. It did it 7 times. It did not translate. It kept asking me, I am going to do this. Now, this reminds of some team members in our team who don't want to do that job. Yeah. And they keep coming back to you and asking questions. So, Chat GPT is finally trained on we humans. So although it has the capability to process a lot of data, but it also has the biases and errors that human bring to the table. So we do not rely fully on AI.
You still have to use that.
Exactly. Exactly. So if you would like to share anything from your organizations here, how you have come across AI, how you think it can help you, that will help us also think of better solutions.
Are we gonna have that session in which you kind of show us practically how this works, like examples?
Absolutely.
Because I may have a couple of questions.
Absolutely.
More when we go to this.
Absolutely. So that's planned for the afternoon session after lunch. I'll take you through. So I'll open AlertSim on the browser, and we'll go through certain checklists. So what you asked about, do we have to feed it data? How does it work? So I'll show you that example.
From our side, we don't use AI for preparedness.
Okay.
We use it for more the academic part. So we
Okay.
use a lot of AI when we are, for example, making sure that the teachers are providing the right classes. So we do a lot of AI for the academic part. For the preparedness part, we don't use it as much. We use a lot of risk assessment too many. So I'm quite interested in seeing how can this
Yeah.
make our life easier. We have risk assessment for everything, and I think it's a little bit too much. It might be counterproductive sometimes.
Hmm.
So I guess we're looking forward to the
Absolutely.
academic part.
Absolutely. And that would be an interesting session. So what I'm going to try and do is I'll show you one, and then on our laptop I'll plug you in, and you can just try. And unfortunately, today we are only going to do one of those routines that we have set up, but we have routines for every type of risk assessment. So there is a routine for emergency response plan review, where you can upload your emergency response plan. It already knows about your facility. It will identify gaps, or you tell him that this has changed in my plant. Where are my gaps? So it can tell you the gaps for that. So in the case study, that's what we are going to discuss. So let me go to the. Are there any important points here? Yeah, I think we have covered this. Would you like me to skip a few of these slides and move to the case study? Because I think I'm going to repeat myself more. Let me come. Let's be a little flexible. Okay, let's start here. So we have talked about readiness cycle. Let's do a quick poll for your own self review. So if you could take a moment to reflect not on perfection but on where your organization stands today for these different parameters. So we have a handout there. Yeah, that's the one. So you can just tick for each one of them where you think your organization uh, lies. So a score of 1 might mean your systems are mostly reactive. So plans exist, but coordination is ad hoc. A 3 could mean structure and training are in place, though improvement is still needed. And a 5 represents what we could call as a matured readiness, systems that evolve continuously, often supported by digital tools or AI insights. So you don't need to share the number aloud, but you could just reflect on it, and if you could share a few uh, you know anecdotes from your organization, that would be really rich for all of us. Yep. Any thoughts anyone would like to share? Any thoughts anyone would like to share based on the assessment?
So if I'm being self-critical, I don't think we're doing that well in terms of the affirmations, especially for considering using AI for preparedness. I don't think we're that prepared. I think we're still, at least in my experience in my organization, doing these things a little the old-fashioned way. Well, like I mentioned before, we use technology for many other things. We're right, we're well ahead of some things, but in this thing, looking at my kind of self-assessment, not that happy with it.
So a good scope to adopt technology.
Well, we at the Readiness, it's el Ministerio de Desarrollo Social, we've been actively participating with SINAPRO, Ministerio de Gobierno, in all the disasters that we had, for example, for flooding last year. And it teaches us a lot of things, and we organize, but we're still in the average 3, 4. We haven't got things. And the only thing I consider here that we got a 5. It's a learning and adaptation, because it's been a learning
continuous
process,
process.
and it's been good.
Thank you.
Maybe in my former life, when I was working with OCHA, as the Office of Coordination, I would say that we were pretty on the 5 on everything, or close to the 5, because our job was to coordinate.
Yeah.
So yes, we were equipped with human
Absolutely.
resources, in funds, in mandate by the organization.
Absolutely.
The challenge is how prepared to be coordinated was the other agency. That was the challenge. And here is where I had a big challenge, because even if I have a very clear mandate and coordination, it's not easy to convince another partner, another agency to be coordinated. Seen as a burden, something extra to the job. I'm already overwhelmed, and you ask me to coordinate with you. And so that was one of the challenges. Not really in my role as an organization, but how do you include those other partner? I just want to come back in one of your previous design, but it's not here as a no, don't come back. It was about this relation with all organizations.
Yeah.
The circle with all the
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
And somebody said, you said it's important depending there is a different way. At the same time, what I learned in coordination, that sometimes it's like a chain, and what can make the difference is the
Weakest link.
point of the chain can break the chain.
Yeah, true.
And so sometimes you have somebody who's not seen as important as, like, take the case of customs, for example. The guy of customs are not seen as an important partner in response. But if your capacity is overwhelmed, the guy of customs has not clear indication of that he should or must let this plane come in the country because he has a lot of medicine. This guy with a very So it's well, more or less what I can say.
What Gerard is describing is what is called in business continuity management the single point of failure.
Failure.
So this is very important, and it's something that you can figure out only when you do the simulations.
Right.
I have lots of anecdotes about this, but in any case, I think that even the interaction between the members that have a role to take during a crisis situation, if they are not used to interacting frequently between each other, then it becomes a big challenge.
Exactly.
Because if Oscar doesn't know Nadeska, and Nadeska doesn't know you, and you have to suddenly work either on a simulation by a computer or in an EOC physically there, it's very difficult to start working effectively together. Because you first have to sort of say, hey, hi, what do you do? Where's your plan? So this is another very important aspect of having a simulation platform that you can use.
Exactly. Very true.
I would like to correct something which my partner just told me, and I was wrong something. I gave 3 in leadership, but this is not, I didn't judge my ministra or my boss. What I did judge was according to all the rules that we work together as INAPRO, Ministerio de Gobierno, and all the other institutions. There I got a 3, but if we just judge my boss, I give her 5, because even though we are not a first response facility, we are willing to do it, and we've been doing it. After Singapore goes in, then we go right away.
Right.
With social assistance mostly, and in some cases also with beds and blankets, medicine, or whatever we can afford, we can do it.
Wow.
I just wanted to clear that up because my partner just made me that mention, and he was right in that.
That's a very good point. Thank you.
Yeah, another point about learning and adaptation. There is something also that's happening in Latin America, but not only. Is every time you have a presidential election, you have a change of people.
Yeah.
So how do you make sustainable and do you learning from those
Institutional memory.
when people are changing? Sometimes you just have the minister, but sometimes from the driver to the head, everybody's changing depending on the context. So I think that will be interesting also to learn from you how we can ensure more sustainability, because I think that, for instance, you need to have a permanent level of learning and adaptation. So, for instance, I continue with the example of custom. Tomorrow there is a new guy in custom. Well, if you don't meet him, if you don't have him, and if you don't train him, the guy will not know. So, how can you use artificial intelligence or something that allows that to overcome this deficiency that you can have? So, to keep at least a level of prediction. For instance, I use always the example of health. You can have the change of minister of health, but you won't question the fact that you need to have sterilization when you go to a surgical block. That's
Correct.
a non-issue.
Correct.
Okay? But you can have issue because people think, yeah, but you know what? The preparedness plan we did, we changed it, and now the guy on the other side don't like him. And how can we ensure this sustainability? Because this is one of the
biggest challenges. Very true. Very true. So, I'm very happy to hear all these views, because when we started designing AlertSim, many of the challenges that you mentioned right now were the things that came to our mind as well. So, just want to give you one example. So we got a project with Qatar Energy, which is the national oil company of Qatar, for conducting emergency management simulations for them. And what was their main challenge on doing the trainings? It's not that they were looking for expertise, but their main challenge was to get senior people in their organization into one room to practice simulation. So they said that this is one reason why we have never been able to meet our compliance calendar of so many simulations in a year, because we don't seem to be able to get everyone in one room and get them to practice. So when we started working on AlertSim, that was one of the main things that, look, AI is nice, but we need a digital platform which will reduce all the uh, stress of coming into one room. Let people connect online. Let there be a virtual emergency operation center, which is exactly like how your physical system is, except that you don't have to physically go there. You can join as we have joined on Zoom right now. So that was one main aspect. Then the second aspect is what Ricardo mentioned just a while ago, that uh, there was a trend somewhere in 2017 to few years ago, where especially after the COVID. So earlier you would send an entire team to a training institute and get them trained on ICS or do tabletop exercises or simulations. And because of budget constraints, and especially after 2020 with the COVID pandemic, we started noticing that they would send one person from their organization to a training center. And what the training center would do is it would look for 5 organizations sending one person. Now imagine that, uh, we are all professionals. We know our procedures well. What we don't know is how we are going to function with our team members. And now you're going to get people to train with some other organization from a very different part of the world. You do not even share the same hazards. So, how are you going to prepare yourselves? So again, a digital platform like AlertSim avoids that. Let your own team train on your own procedures, on your own hazards, on your own risks, and then when there is a crisis, you will be able to respond to it like you own the moment. So that was the idea behind it. um, okay, I will quickly finish a few more slides that I have, and then we can probably break for lunch and we move to the exciting part of the masterclass. So what we are trying to do here is, okay, I'm going to see my English slide also because I'm getting confused with the Spanish. So what are the common gaps in emergency planning? It's a nice segue into this slide. We're just discussing the same thing. So before we discuss solutions, it is important to recognize the practical challenges that most organizations, regardless of sector or geography, continue to face. So the first one is outdated plans. Many emergency response plans remain static, updated only after something has gone wrong rather than proactively. That lag can mean the difference between preparedness and surprise. And think, what's the word? Uh, Two different parties coming together and working. A contractor has come. Exactly, integration between two parties. Bridging ERP documents, they are never bridged enough to be able to understand all the risks that are there. And the second is limited information flow. That's something that we have all experienced. Critical data often sits in silos, whether meteorological, operational, or health related. When those systems don't speak to each other, decisions take much longer to take happen, and response time suffers. A third is weak coordination across agencies. Fourth is infrequent or isolated drills. We just discussed that. Many organizations run tabletop or partial exercises every year, but they rarely test real world interagency coordination. Uh, in ADNOC, they would typically do one large scale event per year with all the people, all the agencies together. And the frequency of doing one was not driven by uh, the criticality, it was driven by practicality. The expense involved in bringing everyone together, that was the main driving point behind this prescriptive number of one per year. But if you have a digital platform, people can come together and do it much more often. And I would just like to speak on the point that Gerard mentioned about how do we maintain a base level. So what we have done with AlertSim is that all the simulations that are run on AlertSim are recorded. video recorded, transcribed on a timeline as to who took what decision when. So, when you do a simulation in a physical room, your after action review is what remains as memory. But when you do it on a platform like AlertSim, the entire thing remains in memory that can be replayed, reviewed, studied at a later stage. So finally, the fifth one is lack of performance measurement. What I just spoke about recording it, AI gives you insights on who performed how, stays in memory. So going digital with your simulations is something that has multi-layered benefits. Now that we have seen where the gaps exist, the next question is simple: how do we bridge them? The answer lies in combining two approaches: systems thinking and AI enabled planning. So, systems thinking helps us see preparedness not as a checklist but as a living ecosystem. People, processes, data, and decisions all influencing each other. Instead of fixing isolated problems, we strengthen the connections between them. And this is where AI becomes powerful. Artificial intelligence acts as the connective tissue. It gathers information continuously, interprets it, translates it into insights that decision makers can act on. Think of AI as the bridge that turns fragmented preparedness into coordinated readiness. On one side, you have outdated plans, fragmented data, isolated drills, and limited evaluation, whereas on the other, you now have readiness goals, coordination, real time awareness, and continuous improvement. AI and systems thinking together close that gap. The important thing to remember is technology does not replace human expertise, it magnifies it. It gives leaders better visibility, it gives planners better foresight, and gives responders a means of faster coordination. So, if you could automate just one part of your readiness process, data, it could be data gathering, scenario generation, or performance tracking, which one would make the biggest difference for your team? So,
Thinking that we would benefit a lot from this. Thinking about the recent things that have happened in the region, I don't think my organization has been contemplating social unrest affecting the business as much as it has in the last few years. So, for example, we have schools in Colombia and Mexico. We have two schools in Colombia which have kind of we had to end the year early last year because there was so much social unrest that the streets were closed.
oh,
And we were contemplating this on our UCBs, on preparedness, and parents weren't able to take the children to school. The buses weren't able to reach the schools. So we did have this on the plans, but this is something that we knew
could
was
happen.
happening, but we didn't forecast it, we didn't prepare for it. Having some models that can help us predict these things on time, considering all the social unrest that's happening in the country, would help us a lot.
Yeah.
This is only one area, all the social unrest, preparedness for disasters. We do have it, but we rely a lot on the national
News.
protection, which is good. But sometimes what we get from civil protection doesn't apply as much for private sector schools because you're the best areas in the city. So when you think about civil protection plans, mostly they are focusing on the most vulnerable areas, which is great. But our schools are on the best areas in the cities, which might not be contemplated in preparedness plans sometimes.
Yeah.
So this, I'm thinking allows many things that
Yeah.
we can benefit from at this
Yeah,
work.
absolutely. Anyone else would like to share anything? The so in the next segment we look at exactly how AI integrates into emergency planning and how to measure the readiness of your existing response plans. So let's take a look at the bigger picture. Traditionally, emergency plans have been static documents written once, updated occasionally, and often reviewed only after something goes wrong. But the world doesn't wait. Hazards evolve, data shifts, and organizations transform much faster than those binders or PDFs can keep up. This is where AI begins to change the rhythm. It doesn't replace planners, it partners with them. The planner engages the AI through prompts, asking it to analyze a particular section, identify inconsistencies, simulate a risk, or test interdependencies. The AI responds with data informed insights, but the validation remains human. What this creates is not automation. So, our goal here is not to automate, it is to collaborate. So, it's like talking to a very intelligent being, someone who can process much more data than what we could process. uh, at the end of the day, the AI is not going to suffer the consequences. It's going to be us who are suffering the consequences. So still retain the right to take decisions, to make decisions. So a live interactive process where plans learn and adapt. Instead of waiting for the annual review, AI enables continuous readiness, integrating real time data from weather forecasts, infrastructure sensors, or even social signals. And this is the outcome: a plan that doesn't sit in a folder, it lives in your system, constantly evolving with the environment around it. Now, the best part, the shift doesn't replace the planner's expertise, it amplifies it. It gives you more time to focus on judgment and coordination while AI handles the data flow underneath. Now let's take move a step deeper into how AI integrates into each stage of the emergency planning cycle. So now that we have seen how AI transforms planning from static to adaptive, let's look at exactly where it fits within the emergency planning cycle. Okay, so this is not translated, unfortunately. So, risk identification: AI continuously scans data streams from environmental sensors, operational systems, or even social indicators to detect new hazards or patterns of vulnerability. That means planners get early warning of emerging risks rather than discovering them after they have evolved into incidents. The second one is scenario modeling. Once risks are identified, AI helps build and test what if scenarios. It's like having a digital sandbox, allowing you to explore multiple versions of an event before it happens. Teams can test different conditions, resource levels, or weather impacts all before a single drill is run. AI also helps refine your emergency plans. It can compare your procedures with recognized standards like ISO 22398 or ICS structures, flagging inconsistencies or outdated steps. Validation and simulation. Before a plan is finalized, AI enables simulation testing, digital exercises that reveal coordination gaps, communication delays, or resource shortfalls. This is where you catch weak points safely before they cost you in a real incident. Finally, continuous improvement. After every exercise or actual event, the AI will reviews what happened, timing, communication flow, decision points, and use those results to recommend immediate updates. It turns post event analysis into a continuous feedback loop. We were doing a simulation using AlertSim with it was a fire scenario. So there was a pump that caught fire. That's the scenario that we are simulating. So what AlertSim does is that it hears what humans are simulating, and in the background it also runs a simulation of its own. So what it noticed at the end of the simulation was something like this: that for the humans, they focused on containment of the fire, containment of the leak of oil that resulted in fire, rather than parallelly fighting the fire also. So it predicted that there was more damage to the assets because both these things didn't go in parallel. So it picks up on these kind of insights by comparing what humans are doing to the simulation that it has run itself. Now we'll come to a case study. So this was an interesting case study we did with Ocean LNG. So let's look at this real world project that we had done. So what happened was Ocean LNG was undergoing expansion, and we are presenting this in the upcoming ADIPEC, Society of Petroleum Engineers conference in Abu Dhabi in November. So Ocean LNG operates a large regasification terminal. It's a high hazard environment involving jetty operations, cryogenic transfer systems, and complex logistics. Now, when the company decided to expand to include a floating storage and regasification unit, FSRU, and ship to ship transfer operations, their existing emergency response plans, which worked well for conventional terminal operations, suddenly needed a complete rethink. So we are exploring a change management situation that would lead to updating your plans. Now these new operations introduced additional hazards, potential vessel collisions, cryogenic spills, mooring failures, all while multiple contractors were working onshore and offshore simultaneously. So you also have simultaneous operations now. Now, the role that AlertSim played is it was used not just to update the emergency response plan, but also to test it to see how the entire response system would behave under simultaneous operations. The platform identified compliance gaps against incident command system, the framework and the standard that the company was using, ISO and maritime safety standards, and generated simulations that allowed the team to rehearse these scenarios before the actual commissioning of the plant. The result was a unified readiness model that gave everyone from the terminal control room to the shipboard captain a synchronized operating picture and offered assurance to the management that even with the changes, we are prepared to manage the risks. So, what did AlertSim do? So, AlertSim conducted an automated benchmarking and gap analysis, not manually, but through AI driven gap analysis. So, typically, what risk consultants would spend hours on doing, you have your standard in front of you, you have your procedure in front of you, and you keep mapping whether we have covered all the hazards. The AI is doing this on its own, and it also allows you to customize the template. So you might have a particular gap analysis template. You can tell him that I want you to use this particular template, and it will compare whichever standard you want it to compare it with and tell you what the gaps are. So it evaluated the plan for Ocean LNG against ICS, ISO, and maritime safety standards. So for example, in the case of ship-to-ship collision, the AI generated updated SOPs and escalation chains that were directly integrated into the emergency response plan. This clarified who does what, reduced mobilization time by almost 40%. For cryogenic spills, the system created dynamic containment scenarios. Responders could visualize what happens, test containment decisions, and improve timing. We were able to increase the scenario coverage index from 15% to 90%. That's a big gap which has been covered, meaning most critical risks were now tested. Similarly, for mooring failures, benchmarking revealed missing contingency actions. Those were tested through virtual scenarios, and brought the procedural completeness score from 0% to 80% before go live. So finally, the ERP as a whole was benchmarked against best practices and aligned with audit readiness requirements. Now, this slide is more in talks more in detail about each of these gaps that were covered. So in terms of ship-to-ship collision, the AI identified that escalation protocols for ship-to-ship collision were missing in the ERP. It then generated role-specific actions, who reports, who authorizes, who mobilizes. The safety team reviewed it, validated it, and implemented these within hours. The result was no confusion, no overlap, faster mobilization. Similarly, for cryogenic spills, uh, the AI picked up limited containment and responder protection measures. It proposed new SOPs covering isolation zones, PPE, and spill suppression techniques. Teams validated these through simulation, improving responder awareness and containment readiness. For mooring failure, benchmarking also revealed missing contingency steps for mooring line breakage during LNG carrier berthing. AI recommended detailed emergency release protocols and tug deployment plans, which the marine team immediately tested through scenario drills. That ensured the crew could respond without delay in a real situation. Finally, when the overall ERP was benchmarked, AlertSim flagged gaps against international standards like ICS and ISO. It auto generated updated templates and notification ladders, ensuring not only operational readiness but also audit and insurer compliance. The key message here is that AI didn't replace human judgment, it amplified it and it did the laborious work of gap analysis. Every recommendation was reviewed, validated, and contextualized by the experts who knew the site best. That combination, data precision with human decision making, is what created readiness that's both verified and auditable. Uh, a few things that I wanted to share here is that the ERP, in this case, the ERP was reviewed for change management, and no, this particular topic is very specific to oil and gas. But think about the Panama Canal. You may not be having oil and gas operations in Panama, but you do share the risks of oil and gas. So when you have a LNG carrier or a oil tanker or a gas carrier going across Panama Canal Authority, you do share the risks, and you want these companies to be bridging their ERP documents with yours, so that if there is a situation, you know how to handle it. So now, once the procedural gaps had been addressed, AlertSim was used to move from planning to performance, generating new high consequence scenarios specifically for training and simulation. So AI scenario generation, the system took the updated ERP and LNG expansion plans as input and created realistic scenarios for ship-to-ship collision, cryogenic spill, and mooring failure. What's important here is that these weren't standard drills; they were AI-generated custom scenarios built to test the rare but high-impact events that are often missing from conventional plans. We also configured a virtual EOC simulation. So marine operations and safety teams ran these simulations together inside a virtual emergency operations center. They practiced coordination, communication, and decision making under real-time pressure, validating escalation chains and stress testing ship to terminal communications. It gave the team not just a plan but the experience of executing it in a real environment. Finally, the performance was benchmarked. So every simulation was measured using two AI performance metrics: the scenario coverage index, which tells you how many possible response situations have been tested, and the procedural completeness score, which measures how well teams followed through on every defined step. So the result was clear. The scenario coverage index rose from 15 to 90%, and PCI improved from 0 to 80%. So that's the case study. And again, we have a few more details, and of course, we'll be sharing this presentation with you so you can go into this more in detail. Now, okay, now let's quickly see. During the LNG implementation, one of the most surprising insights didn't come from the algorithms, it came from the people. So after the simulation runs, the safety team noticed that coordination improved not because new procedures were added, but because for the first time everyone could see the same operational picture on one screen. So that was an interesting thing. So let's go to the next slide now. So a few things I wanted to share here, that even the best designed emergency plans can underperform when tested in real conditions. The reason is simple: plans operate in context, and context changes very often. So a plan might look perfect on paper, but the moment we add real world factors, a delayed communication line, a flooded access route, or a shortage of key personnel, its performance can change completely. That's why scenario based validation is so critical. It's not about rewriting plans, it's about testing how those plans behave under realistic stress. Scenarios act as a bridge between planning and performance, allowing teams to validate coordination, decision making, and resource flow before a real emergency happens. Now, this is where AI becomes a force multiplier. AI helps us replicate context, drawing on live environmental data, operational factors, and even past incident histories to build data rich simulations. It allows us to test readiness safely under conditions that are realistic enough to challenge but controlled enough to learn. Readiness isn't about what's written in a plan, it's about how that plan behaves when reality shifts. So next we'll look at what makes a scenario truly realistic and how AI brings together multiple data layers to create meaningful, measurable tests of readiness. How am I doing on time? I have 10 more minutes, 8 more minutes. Okay. So when we say AI generate, I think this is the last slide and then just a discussion slide. So when we say AI generated scenario, we are not talking about a random emergency story. A realistic scenario is a data construct, one that reflects how your organization truly operates under stress. Now, in AlertSim, these are some of just a few of the parameters that we would like to discuss today. So it will consider your operations and procedures. So this layer defines what people are supposed to do, what is included in your operations. So your SOPs, checklists, and decision protocols. Infrastructure and assets. So the AI maps your physical and digital systems, communication lines, control centers, logistics routes, identifying dependencies and bottlenecks that could fail under pressure. The third layer is the people and organizations. This is where coordination happens. AI scenarios simulate how teams collaborate within your organization and with external partners like contractors, regulators, or public responders. Environment and geography, terrain, weather, population zones can determine whether a plan works or collapses. A port in the Caribbean and a refinery in the desert face completely different context layers, and AI adapts to those differences automatically. Finally, information and time dynamics. Time is often the most revealing layer. How fast information moves, who receives it, and how long decisions actually take in real time. That makes a big difference. Now, AI connects these layers, operational, human, environmental, to create a full 360-degree scenario. And then it lets you test these real complexities in a safe environment without exposing people or assets. And of course, humans still drive this. So that's the benefit of. So we choose what to test, what data to include, and how to interpret results. AI just helps us see the entire system clearly. So comprehensive scenarios integrate technical, human, and environmental data, creating a realistic test of coordination and readiness. So with that, we have completed this session. So if you have any questions, anything that you would like to share, I would love to hear.
You will maybe after the session or the lunch, the information that the system requires in order to prepare correct scenarios.
Yeah.
Call it the prompts, whatever it is.
Absolutely.
So that will be covered.
Absolutely. So, in fact, that's a very good point. The way AlertSim is structured is through prompts, and what we have done with regards to prompts is we have relied on industry approved checklists. So the one that I'm going to share with you is based on the UK HSE regulations, the COMA regulations. So whenever we have to prepare a emergency response plan, or the one that we're going to share with you is developing a scenario, the AI needs to understand the context of your organization. And how do you develop the context? Based on checklists coming from standards. So we do not want AI to think on its own or come up with something else. We want it to be grounded in standards that we have been using for so long. So your prompts are generated by, in this case, the UK HSE COMA regulations. Yeah. But similarly, we have forms based on the ICS incident command system. We have it based on, you can customize, we have also customized it to national level of frameworks. Any other questions?
I have a question regarding the security of the data.
Yeah.
Especially, for example, ourselves that we deal with sensible information regarding children and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that the system has all the security needed that any data would be right?
Absolutely. So the way we handle this is that in two regards. One is that we develop when we configure it for you, we do it on the cloud that you have been using. So when we did it for Abu Dhabi National Oil Company or Qatar Energy, they have a requirement that the data has to reside within the country on the clouds provided by UAE's data centers. So this was configured fully to their requirement. Similarly, if we do it for you, it would be on your cloud. So we will not come in picture for when you are sharing data, we wouldn't have access to it. Yes, sir.
One comment. It would be interesting if you can also indicate the flexibility that you can have when using simulation platforms such as others. This is because I have heard Ashish explain this to people in Google, for example. So going to your case, or your case, you can actually do simulations for specific infrastructure or facilities. So
Yes.
you can one day choose, okay, I want to do a simulation just in this high school,
Hmm.
in such city, which is prone to such hazards. Or you want to do it in this school, in that country, which is prone to whatever hazards. So you don't need to have a specific plan to run it for a specific location. You can just provide Alexei with information of where the infrastructure is located, what its context is, and then simulate just specifically for that facility. So,
Absolutely. Thank you for that question, Ricardo. So the way it functions is that we have created an information hierarchy. So you have an organization. So that could be, say, Cognita. It could be the Panama Canal Authority, and within each organization, you can create multiple assets. So one asset could be, say, the Panama Canal Authority, Panama Canal, and then another could be Panama Canal expansion. The third could be, a school. Like in your case with Cognita, you could say my organization is Cognita, but my asset is, say, Colombia. And within Colombia, I have multiple units. So multiple schools in Colombia would come under the Colombia asset under multiple units. So similarly for Panama Canal Authority, it could be that kind of a hierarchy. So at organization level, you tell him what you do generally. At a asset level, it basically understands the geography, where you are located, what are the hazards there. At a unit level, that's where you tell him, I have so many people in the school, and I'm not going to tell you, you don't have to give him the names of the people. So I have so many people in the school, so many teachers, this is my profile of my people. So you give him unit based for that particular facility information. So, and when you develop a scenario or when you test an emergency response plan, you're doing it at a unit level. So it understands all these three layers of information.